Hey everybody, it's Chris, and I am here today to show you how I pour a wood letter. These wood letters are purchased at Hobby Lobby, and they're an 18-inch wood letter. To prepare it, on the back side, I use 1.5-inch painter's tape, and I tape all the way around the edges. And then I use a sharp craft knife or X-Acto knife, and I trim all the edges down so that I have nice clean lines and curves. The reason that I put painter's tape all the way around before I paint it is once this is finished, it will get a coat of resin. And I find that it's a lot easier to have the surface covered with tape to pull it later after the resin is done so that it's a much cleaner look. So this is a special request from a family member for these colors. After I did a pour last weekend with the ultramarine blue, black, and silver, she requested a letter in those colors. So that's what I'm going to do today. So I generally pour about 10 ounces of paint with the letters, and sometimes I have to add a little bit more, sometimes that's enough. It kind of depends on the letter itself. The H is a pretty good sized letter though, so it's got quite a bit of surface. So I'm going to start with 10 ounces of paint. These are 5-ounce cups. I've lightly sprayed them with a silicone spray so that my paint releases. As I said before, I'm using ultramarine blue and black, and I'm using my custom silver, which is Liquitex Silver Basics, as well as the Rust-Oleum glitter paint that I like to use. And when I did the pour last weekend, I actually had silicone in the paints, but I don't want to have to mix special paint today. So I'm just going to go ahead and add just a drop of silicone here and there in the cup. And then I'm going to use a popsicle stick just to kind of give it a quick stir around before I pour it out, and hopefully that will suffice with helping me to create some cells. So this is my black paint. All of my paints are mixed with pouring medium, and then I'm also going to use my white, which is the Artist Loft Flow Acrylic White, and I'm just layering my paints in. I'm not super particular that they do or don't mix within the cup. That's okay because it's being poured onto the surface. But I just kind of like to layer my paint so that I know that I have a good even amount of paint in each one. And then I also have the Rust-Oleum glitter paint by itself, just mixed with my pouring medium. So I will add some of that as well, just to have a little bit more sparkle as I go along. And I'm going to add one more drop of silicone here in each cup. I'm trying not to get too crazy with the silicone, but I do want to have some nice reaction with it, and I don't think that the colors that I've chosen will really give me a lot of reaction on their own. So this is just the silver Liquitex paint, or excuse me, silver Rust-Oleum glitter, and that one tends to dry clear if it doesn't have other paint in it, so that's why I like to mix it in between other colors when I add it to a pour. Okay, so I'm just going to continue to add my paints and layer these cups up. And then I'll go back and add in a little more silicone probably. Just another drop or two here and there. And I want to make sure that I get my white in there, which is kind of tending to mix down through the paint, which is fine. All right. And then we'll add in some more blue. Kind of want to get heavy on my blue because I want to make sure my blue shows up. Seems like last weekend when I was doing my pours, my blue kind of disappeared. So putting in a little more of the silver and just a little bit of black because I don't want it to take over. And then we'll add in just the plain silver Rust-Oleum paint just so that it has a little extra sparkle. I'm not being super careful with how I do this. And then I just want one more drop of silicone in there. All right, and then I'm gonna put some more blue in here, and then I'll top it off with white. And I think we're pretty much ready to see if this is gonna pour okay. I think my paints are kind of thick today, but that's all right. We'll see what happens. All right, so that looks pretty good for my 2 cups of paint. I've got just a popsicle stick. I'm just gonna run it down through once into each cup to make sure that they are stirred up okay. That's Cooper saying hello to all of you. All right, I'm gonna set 1 cup over here to the side. What I have noticed when I pour letters, I don't generally flip my cups over because I like to have a little more control, so I like to pour. but I've noticed that I can pour kind of into a puddle and it'll give me a different effect than if I were to actually do stripes across. So you actually can do stripes across and get a different effect of paint. But for this one, I just kind of want to pour. I generally start at the top of my letter, and then I just want to make sure that I have all of my colors in here, and then I'm going to start down here. And I don't necessarily want lines created, so kind of going in different directions here so that I get some different effects. And then I'll just go through the center here. I like to make sure that I have a lot of paint on my surface because I actually want my paint to flow over the sides and coat the sides if I can. So that's 1 cup. And then I'm just going to grab this other cup and start at the bottom and work my way up, just in case my colors are in here a little bit differently on this cup. So once again, just kind of making swirling motions. I don't necessarily want lines everywhere. So I'm just kind of trying to get my paint on here in different motions so that I don't have lines created. Okay, and then just going to kind of go back here. And I want a little bit more darker color down here. Okay, so I like to make sure that there's a lot of paint on the surface. This is looking pretty good, but I do want more paint, so I've added just a little bit more to my cup. I'm gonna go back up here because I've got a lot of blue and kind of dark colors. So I'm just gonna add a little extra in there, and then kind of go along here on my edges and put just a little more paint down so that my surface is covered. Cooper is not happy because he wants to go in the bedroom and sleep. So he's protesting very loudly. So I'm just going to continue to put paint along the edges because I do like how the center of my letter is looking. So I'll just add some paint to the edges. I found that it's better to have extra paint to go over the edges. That's the hardest part, in my opinion, of pouring these letters, is to make sure that the edges are covered. So that's why I like to have a lot of extra paint and make sure that it's already flowing over the sides before I start to tilt. So I'm just going to add a little bit more down here and make sure that's kind of going over. And I know that I have a lot on my surface, and I know that as I pick it up and start to tilt, it will cover most of it. But there's a lot of little curves that you don't realize are there. So I'm also going to use my spatula and pick up some of this paint that has come off and just kind of put this over here on the edges. I know that most of this will come off the edge, so I'm not too concerned that it's perfect, but it will help to cover my edges. So I'm just going to kind of pick that up and put that where I need it. The bottom down here is a little bit light on paint, so I'll pick some more of this up and just kind of put it in the areas where I need it. Like I said, not super concerned that I'm using paint drippings because it will get tilted off anyway. But I just want to make sure that everything is pretty much covered. I don't want to see very much of the wood showing. So I found that if I have most of my wood surface covered on the tops of it, that I can usually get it to fill in as I tilt it. Okay, so you can see that we've got some cells popping up. It's looking pretty good. So I am going to take my torch and see if I can get a little bit more action to come up since we put that silicone in the paint. And this will also help to pop some bubbles and kind of get things moving along as well. It's looking pretty good though. I think it's going to be pretty neat when we're done. Okay, so now I want to pick it up and tilt it. So my goal is to tilt to each side so that I can cover all of my sides, and then I'll go up and down so that I can cover the top of the letter as well as the bottom of the letter. So I just want to kind of gently go over the side, and then I want to come back the other way, make sure that I've got my sides coated, and then we're going to go down and up so that we can get everything coated. And sometimes I don't have the whole surface covered, and that's okay. Just kind of looking to see what I do need to cover, because it's kind of hard to see all the angles when you first tilt. So I'm just kind of going back and tilting a little bit more and trying to make sure that I've got everything covered. I apologize that you're not able to see, but I will set it back down here in a second once I've got the majority of it covered. Okay, that's looking really cool. I like all of the neat things that the paint is doing. So I will tell you that I'm going to take my gloves off because I found that when I have paint on my hands, I have actually dripped onto the letter. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick up my paint off of my plastic and just come back up here and try to touch up these edges that did not get covered when I tilted. And this is probably the trickiest part of doing one of these letters. And I will tell you that I do nothing to prep the surface. I don't prime it to get it started. I just pour it as it comes from Hobby Lobby. I take the back of it, and then I also do use my sanding block, and I'll sand down the edges of it because sometimes the edges are kind of rough, but that is all the prep that I do with this, and I find that it covers beautifully. I've made quite a few of these letters and sold quite a few letters, and they always cover nicely. I don't have any problems with the surface being coated because it's not primed. So all I'm doing right now is just kind of touching up the areas that did not get covered with paint, because no matter how carefully I try, sometimes they don't always get coated well. It is a lot of surface to look at when you're trying to tilt and make sure that everything looks perfect. So the other thing that I will do is when I'm finished with this angle, I will actually flip it the other way just to make sure that I have all angles covered, because even though I can see some of it from this angle, I can't see all of it. So it's very hard to catch everything. Okay, and then I'm just going to scrape the extra paint off here so it's not quite so messy when I flip it. I generally let the letters cure for about 2 weeks before I resin them. I don't generally let these cure as long as I do a painting. I kind of feel like it's porous and it kind of absorbs, and I also live in Iowa and it's winter right now, so the humidity is not super high, so I don't feel like it has to cure as long as some other things do. My paintings, I always wait at least a month, but other projects, I'm not quite as patient, so I don't usually wait as long. Okay, so I'm just going to flip this guy around so that I can make sure that I have everything covered. Hopefully I can flip it around. Just gonna grab a hold of it, set it back on my plastic cups, just to make sure that I can see all angles. And it's a good thing I did that because the top of it did not get covered completely. So it's always a good idea to turn it around and to look from every angle. Because I've learned from experience, it is very hard to get all of the parts covered on this. So, and it's quite easy just to turn it around and make it work. So, all right. So this is looking pretty good. And as I said, it'll sit for probably at least 2 weeks before it does get coated with resin. I generally use the Stone Coat countertop resin, just because I kind of tend to use that on all my projects. I find that it's easier just to buy one resin and use it on most everything rather than have different ones to use. Plus it does have a UV rating in it, so I feel like it should work well. I make sure that I coat all of my edges with resin so that if it is going outside, that it'll help protect it from the elements. But I think this one turned out really neat. I love the colors and I love all the reactions that the paint has done. So I will take a couple of still pictures for you and add that onto the video so that you can see kind of some close-up details of it. And if you have any questions, please let me know, and thank you so much for watching.